And so yeah, I think this is my first personalized signed book in my collection. Hi book people, my name is Valerie and I love talking about books. And I've had kind of a bookish week, or really last couple of weeks, and I just kind of wanted to share some bookish updates, some things I've been doing. I live in Seattle, so I've been really kind of enjoying the local book culture lately in Seattle. I went to the first book signing event that I've ever been to this week at a local bookstore. I've also been trying to visit all the local independent bookstores in Seattle, so I have a couple that I visited in recent weeks that I can talk about today. And yeah, books and books events have been on my mind lately, so I just wanted to chat about them. So I went to my first book signing ever this past week. This was an event that was hosted by the Elliott Bay Book Company, which is in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood. It was a free event, which we love, and they hosted Sarah Gran, the author. Sarah Gran is the author of Come Closer, as well as a bunch of other books that I have not read, but Come Closer is the one that I read most recently. Come Closer I love. It is short, it's like 140-ish pages. It is a horror story about demonic possession. A woman is trying to figure out if she's losing her mind or if she has become possessed by a demon. I love this cover. It's the UK cover. Yeah, it's just a short, fun, creepy possession story. And I actually first heard about this book. I was reading the novel by Gus Moreno, This Thing Between Us, and that book really stuck with me. It was really emotionally disturbing and a gut punch. A guy who's grieving the loss of his wife. His wife just passed. His apartment is kind of haunted and he ends up traveling to a remote mountain destination, and this evil presence just continues to relentlessly haunt him. Oh, it's a book that it was in my top 10 last year, but it's tough to recommend. I guess if you like horror, you like to feel those types of things. Yeah, really scary and sad. Anyway, in the acknowledgements section of that book, of Gus Moreno's This Thing Between Us, he mentioned that he had read Come Closer by Sarah Gran, I think 3 or 4 times, and it was part of the inspiration for that novel of his. So that was what drew me to Sarah Gran and Come Closer in the first place, and I'm super happy I read this. Would definitely recommend. Sarah Gran is now promoting her newest book, which is called Little Mysteries. This one is not horror, it's a collection of short stories that presumably are all mysteries. And this event was kind of her giving a talk, and then that was followed by a book signing. And it was cool to hear her talk. I actually didn't know that she started her own publishing company. It was just cool to see an author like actively try to step away from those larger publishing companies. She was talking about one of the stories in this book in particular, and it was modeled after kind of a choose your own adventure story. It's called 5 Minute Mystery, the case of the mysterious Dr. Crowley, or Fuck This World Indeed. It was just funny. She was just talking about how you kind of get the intro to this mystery and then you're left with a choice of try to figure out what's going on, invest your time in the allure of this mystery, or do you just want to close the book right now and go and watch TV. And it's just funny. So I am intrigued and definitely want to get to this book. Come Closer is awesome though. I love it. And so that is the one that I chose for her to sign. And so yeah, I think this is my first personalized signed book in my collection. So I definitely want to try to keep looking for author events locally in Seattle. I found this one just by going to the Elliott Bay bookstore website, and they have an events section. I already found another event for, I think next month, for a dystopian novel. In the Dream Hotel, I think is the title. But yeah, Elliott Bay seems to host a bunch of author event signings, and so they have an email newsletter, so definitely check that out if you are local and also interested in book events. I hadn't really known how to find book signings before. There are other options and better ways that people find these book events, but this is a fun place to start. And if you know of any other ways to find book events, definitely please let me know in the comments. Like I said, would love to go to more. In other bookish updates, I have been kind of consciously trying to visit all of the independent bookstores in and around Seattle. I absolutely love going to independent bookstores, both used and new bookstores. I love seeing the staff recommendations and all of the displays, and just wandering around and reading the back covers, and usually have like a coffee in my hand, and it's just the perfect way to spend a couple hours on a Saturday. And I felt kind of extra inspired lately because I went to the Queen Anne bookstore, which is in the Queen Anne neighborhood in Seattle. And I found this really cool kind of art print of a bunch of bookstores in Seattle, and I'll show you. It's actually right behind me on my wall. Bookshops of Seattle. But yeah, so I went to Queen Anne Book Company, which is actually on this print, and I didn't get any books there, but I did find this print there, and so I picked that up. And Queen Anne Book Company was super cute, especially because there was a coffee roaster right next door. So they made it super easy to have that perfect afternoon. Like, we went in, got a coffee, and then walked right next door to the bookstore. It was just lovely sipping my coffee and browsing the book selection. It was a really small bookstore, but definitely would still recommend checking it out. They only sell new books, I think, but just for that coffee book pairing vibes alone, like, it was a fun time. So there are 8 bookstores on this print, and I've now been to 3 out of the 8. This is by no means all of the bookstores in Seattle. I've definitely been to a ton more that aren't on this print, but one that I have been to multiple times now is Elliott Bay Book Company, which I mentioned just a couple minutes ago, and that was where the book signing was. Elliott Bay, I think, is probably the biggest independent bookstore in Seattle. It works really well as kind of like a community hangout. I think their hours are probably the best I've ever seen for any bookshop. I think they're open something like 9 a.m. to 10 p.m. every day of the week, and so they're really catering to book lovers. They do primarily sell new books, but they also have a table of bargain priced books, which I love. Yeah, I'm all about supporting Elliott Bay, especially because I just learned that they host these author events, which is so much fun. And then the only other one that I've been to that's on this print is Finney Books, which is in Finney Ridge, which is another neighborhood in Seattle. This is another store that's on the smaller side, and they sell new books only. Really good staff recommendations. And while I was there, I picked up In the Dream House, which is a memoir that I am super excited to read. I've only heard good things about it. I think it's about an abusive relationship, but the format is pretty stylistically unique. I think each chapter kind of has its own narrative style. One of them is a haunted house, one of them is a creature feature, one of them is American Gothic. Like, it's just lots of cool stuff in this book, and I definitely am excited to read it. And then lastly, I went to a bookstore that is not on this list here in this print. And I think that's because it's a used bookstore, and it's called Apparition Books in Renton, which is kind of south of Seattle. And this store was super unique. It's kind of occult themed. There were a couple book display tables of like magic, occult, kind of darker themed books, which is just fun. And I love nothing more than a used bookstore. I love just raking through all of the used books, and it's almost like treasure hunting, getting lost in the stacks. The price point is way better. So while I was there, I got 5 books. I got books 2 and 3 from Elena Ferrante's The Neapolitan Quartet series. I already have the first book, which is My Brilliant Friend. I actually found that in a free little library, and so I was super psyched to find books 2 and 3 at the used bookstore, so also at a discounted price. I don't know much about it, but I think the first book of the series was named the best book of the century by Time magazine, maybe. Everyone just raves about how good of a story it is. It's coming of age, female friendship. So I'm really hyping up these books, and hope that I don't let myself down. Also, I've got Sea Monsters by Chloe Arigis. This one I had never heard of, but it sounds like kind of a surreal coming-of-age story. Louisa leaves her home in Mexico City, and she wants to track down a traveling troupe of Ukrainian dwarfs. Surreal dreams, a beach community. Yeah, it just sounds kind of weird and fun, and I love that. Also picked up My Sister the Serial Killer. This one is a new addition to my TBR. And then I got The Most by Jessica Anthony. And this one I actually have already read. Please clap. It's again a really short novel, I think only maybe 120-ish pages, and it's about a housewife in the 1950s who decides to stay home from church, and she gets into the community swimming pool and she decides to not come out for the whole day. I just, a fun picture of a marriage in disillusion. My last bookish update, which this is not a local thing, but I have started using NetGalley in the past month or so, which is a service that allows book reviewers to access advanced copies of upcoming books. So you can read them as ebooks before they are officially published, and then give feedback and review them. So I'm relatively new to the book online community. I've only really been talking about books on social media for a couple months. So I'm just starting to use NetGalley, but it has been so much fun. The 2 books I've read so far are Oh Sinners by Nicole Cuffey and Shy Girl by Mia Ballard. And both of those books did not miss. They were so much fun. Oh Sinners I feel like I'm going to talk about all the time because it was a cult story, but it was not at all what I was expecting when I went into it. It's using this fictional cult as a way to talk about how BIPOC have been controlled in this country and historically. It's got like 4 different interwoven narratives. It was just really cool and super unique from any other cult story I have read. And then just last week I read Shy Girl by Mia Ballard. This one I blew through. I think I read it in like a day and a half, which is really quick for me. I tend to read books a little bit slower. Yeah, this one was just addictive and super fun, and I finished it on Valentine's Day, which I loved, because it's a story about a girl who is desperate for cash. She is really close to getting evicted from her apartment, and so she is trying to find a sugar daddy, and then she finds one, and it ends up just turning into this story about power and manipulation and captivity. I don't want to give too much away, but he basically treats her as his pet. Some aspects of the story are very similar to Night Bitch by Rachel Yoder, but Shy Girl just like takes the intensity up by 1000%. Like, it is wild. It's weird and it's fun, and there's a lot of female rage, and it's a revenge story. I just love the underlying, not subtle at all, message of, you know, just let women control their bodies. Let women have the freedom to control their bodies. Let women have bodily autonomy. And that message is packaged in this short and weird and fun body horror story. If you don't like horror, it might be a little bit tough to stomach, but worth it if you can get past that. And both of those books release in March. My most anticipated upcoming titles that I got approved for on NetGalley are What Hunger by Catherine Dane and A Game in Yellow by Haley Piper. What Hunger sounds like a lot of fun as well. It's got female rage, coming of age, cannibalism, I believe. In the description it says for fans of Jennifer's Body and Little Fires Everywhere, and I love both of those things, so I'm sure I'm gonna love this book. It also reminded me that I really want to read The Lamb by Lucy Rose, which I think was just published in January of this year. And that's another kind of gothic coming of age story that features female rage and cannibalism, and it's got kind of like a folk horror vibe, and so why would I not want to read that? And then A Game in Yellow by Haley Piper is another kind of horror magical realism story. A lesbian sex life is kind of in a rut, and they meet this strange man who shows them pages from this weird, obscure play. And if you read too much of it, you will fall into madness. But if you read just a little bit and then you're able to pull back, it's supposed to be like an adrenaline rush. And all that sounds super fun and interesting in and of itself. But the play, the weird play in this book is The King in Yellow. And lo and behold, I actually owned that book. And I recently got this. This is part of the Penguin Weird Fiction collection. I got the whole collection. I love weird books, and these covers are awesome. And so I'm gonna kind of read this first and then read The Game in Yellow, and I am super excited for that pairing. Okay, that's it. That's all my bookish updates from the past couple of weeks. Thanks for sticking around. Thanks for watching if you're here. Hope you're having a great February, and hope that you are reading and finding books that you love.